Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hello, Ryan. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 2022.
This is our annual New Year's spectacular, right? That's the episode we're doing?
I don't think it's a spectacular. Folks got a lot of spectacular in the last episode. This is a more, mellow spectacular.
You know what was very interesting with those people who went back to the former Christmas spectaculars? They got a little taste in the 2021 spectacular, went back to the Christmas spectacular 2020, 2019.
I have to say it was bizarre, but I'm super thankful for our new listeners who haven't heard all the Christmas specials to want to go back, but save some, for another Christmas season.
No. These are like the Christmas Story movie. You come every year.
Every year.
You gather around the Yule log. You throw on a playlist that's just every year spectacular, one after the other.
I think that's, if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, that's what people are doing. They're at their Christmas dinner. They're just sitting silently and they're listening to us talk, which is like what it's like to probably be at dinner with their families.
It's like an extended grace. That's what listening to the podcast feels like at that dinner table.
Oh, I totally agree.
Now, Ryan, happy. This is a new year, which means a new year, new us.
Does it?
No, I feel very similar.
Yeah, I feel very similar.
Terrified of COVID. Still not able to travel anywhere overseas. It does feel vaguely familiar.
It does feel like we've gone back a few steps before we get to go forward again.
But there is some exciting news on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I want to give a big shout out to all of our listeners on Spotify. And I don't use Spotify to listen to podcasts. And, when you look at the charts, for the longest time, we were just dominated by iTunes. And lately, Spotify is making a really big play. So thanks to all the folks who are listening on Spotify. Keep sharing, telling your friends. We appreciate, seeing every month, like the downloads go up. It's a good sign.
And we particularly like if you could do us the favor of a rating or a comment.
If you have review. Nice things to say.
And of course, it being the beginning of a new year, Ryan and I are charting out all the topics we want to tackle in 2022. And, we're an open book here. Yes, it is hard to keep a travel podcast going when there are so many travel restrictions going on in the world. So if you have an idea or a question, you can always reach us on outofofficepod@gmail.com.
outofofficepod@gmail.com. Or you can slide into our DMs on Instagram.
You just slip right into
it. Podcast.
OOO podcast. That's the handle.
That's the handle. And I put some
now
great...
You said, it's more like ooh podcast, like you're admiring a podcast.
which I always do.
And Ryan, we haven't actually done this before. I was surprised. I looked back in the catalog, but today we are going to share our New Year's travel resolutions.
I'm excited about this. And you know what? This is a difficult year to do this because these are stuff that we want to accomplish this year. But, when the ninth Delta wave comes or whatever it'll be, it might be more difficult. But fingers crossed. Yeah, the Omega. When it gets to Z, do they have to start all over again? How does that work?
Did you also see there's something there they're calling Flu-rona now? People who get the flu and corona.
Oh gosh, I got all my shots, folks. Boosted, flu shot, the whole works.
Rabies.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But before we jump
travel
into
vaccinations, that would be a really interesting episode.
As in vaccinations that are required for travel?
Exactly, yeah. I've had to get some.
Oh, me too. Dude, the best one. Have you ever gotten the yellow fever one?
No, I want that.
You get the yellow fever one, and then they put a yellow card that you have to keep inside your passport. And every time you take your passport, it's loose. It doesn't seal in, but you get the credit of people knowing you needed yellow fever vaccinations. I can't remember. I think I needed that one either for Peru or Malaysia. But either way, it was.
I don't mind a little yellow fever. I hear it's just like a cold.
No, but come on, getting a vaccine. I love when they tell me all the vaccines. It makes me feel like I'm being so adventurous.
It does. It does. It's like traveling without leaving your doctor's office.
Exactly. Listen, I think the resolutions are more important this year than they've ever been, because it is hard to keep the spirit of travel alive in these times when we can only travel, locally, and maybe you're lucky enough to be able to get to Mexico or Canada, but a lot of the world is shut off right now. But Ryan, it is our job to keep this spirit alive.
Yeah, we have done this throughout the pandemic, and we will continue through the long pandemic to keep the spirit alive and travel whenever we possibly can.
Now, Ryan, before we take off and get into the topic at hand of resolutions, I'm happy to say I want to kick us off with a quest for Rick Steves update.
I have no idea what this is going to be, folks. So I am as excited as you are.
Well, Ryan, what do you think it is?
Rick, are you there?
No. Sorry. Rick has unfortunately not yet agreed to be on the show. Folks will remember he has sent us audio messages. We're in touch with his people frequently. They say that we really get the brand. We're two of Steve's biggest advocates. Remember last time we checked in, he was teasing that he's working on a major new TV project all about arts and culture. He called it his magnum opus. So I don't know if that's coming out in 2022. If so, my resolution, of course, will be to watch that 500 times. But
at least.
I am thrilled that on December 29th, to wrap up the year, our friend Rick Steves, who you may remember did not do an interview with us because his people said he only talks to the New York Times or NPR. Well, Ryan, he has opened that door a little bit, and he did an interview with Outside Magazine.
Yeah, he does like the outside.
Are you familiar with Outside Magazine?
I'm not. I should be.
This is an outdoorsy, outside sports magazine. And Rick Steves, we'll put a link in the show notes, of course. It's called What You Missed, How Rick Steves Got Hooked on Hiking. The travel guru discusses the adventures that fueled his newfound love for hiking. And there's a charming picture of, that iconic dad bod, Rick Steves, holding up two hiking poles. So he's keeping himself safe. He's got support. He's got the belt of his backpack safely snug around his waist, and he's looking great. I believe he's even wearing hiking pants.
You have to imagine he was listening to all of my socially distant hiking podcasts. And that's where I got the idea.
They're not just your podcast, Ryan. You may not remember, but I'm also featured on them.
Yeah, and, you might be in those episodes. I'll have to check.
This is a fascinating facet of Rick Steves coming to light, which is, he really has always had a very strong focus. His brand is called Rick Steves Europe. He only puts out guides on Europe. Broadly defined, he does have an Iceland guide. So, he stretches what some might define as Europe, but Iceland counts in his book. And, he is a very city focused person where there's walking tours where you go to churches and museums and restaurants and hotels that he likes. And he is not really a go-to resource for the outdoors. And maybe that's going to be changing, because in this Outside article, Rick Steves discusses that he's now embracing the outdoor life. Let me quote the article. Prior to 2021, Steves had largely overlooked one major side of European travel, the great outdoors. That changed in September when Steves went on a 6-day trek through the French Alps. Quote, "Here I am, supposed to be this expert on European travel, and I've never done a multi-day hike in the Alps." He did a 60-mile route, which is a part of a 110-mile trail around Europe's highest peak. That's what he was doing in the Alps. And, he credits his stretching regimen and his pacing strategy for allowing his body to adapt to this trail. And it sounds like he's going to embrace our love of the great outdoors, Ryan.
I'm glad we finally got him on board. There's more to Europe than just beautiful buildings and food and music. The great outdoors. I
mean, I think this opens up fascinating new areas. We could see new additions to the guidebooks. We could see new types of guidebooks. Maybe he would even embrace a guidebook for things like the national parks. I mean, Ryan, it doesn't end. This is great fodder for what I am sure is going to be the year of Rick Steves, 2022, when he finally comes on the podcast.
I can feel it. I feel really good about this. I mean, we are moving right along. This is episode 111. he sort of implied that, he'd show up at some point. So
he definitely did. And as we always say, this seat is not taken for Rick Steves. We got a Rick Steves seat right here in the Out of Office studio. Rick, the quest for Rick Steves continues. I hope you didn't think that it was going to end with that wonderful audio message that folks can go back and hear on episode 100. And, Ryan, I didn't put it in the resolutions because I think it's just understood. Rick Steves being booked on the show. This is a resolution since this podcast started.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's been almost criminal how we've tried to get Rick on the show. But those cease and desist letters, they've become, I think, nicer and nicer.
They're fuel for my fire. I get those paper letters, I throw them right into the furnace, and I keep chugging on down the track. So
exactly.
I'm gonna file away this outside article, this new late breaking interview with Rick Steves. We're gonna add it to the interview list. I mean, by the time he gets here, we're gonna have hours of material.
I'm sure he's gonna give us 15 minutes tops. So we gotta par that down.
Well, listen, if he comes within the next month, we will definitely be asking him what his resolution is. So, Ryan, I think it's time for you and me to jump in, take off, and we don't call it the jump in. We call it the takeoff. It's time for us to take off to talk about our New Year's travel resolutions.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan, we are here sailing in the sky and, of course, sailing into a brand new year with fresh possibilities. So what I was thinking we could do here is each of us has made 3 travel-related resolutions. And, there's a whiff of the last stop in this. How are we keeping the spirit of wanderlust within us awake and enlivened and enriched in the year ahead? So what do you say you kick us off? We'll go back and forth and we'll each trade. Hopefully, it'd be wonderful if any listeners want to send in what their travel resolutions are, or they could send them to outofofficepod@gmail.com. We could share them on the future show, maybe get some ideas.
I love that.
So, Ryan, what's resolution number 1?
So, as folks know who've listened to the podcast, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico and Colombia. But I haven't really gotten to explore much else in Central and South America. So this year, after my big birthday party, my big 40th birthday party in Mexico City in April, I'm planning a trip to go to Argentina, which is super exciting.
Yeah,
and possibly Paraguay, depending on how things play out. So,
wow.
I was debating like Peru, but if I do Peru, it's got to be like a longer trip, because I wanted to go do the whole, Machu Picchu thing that you've talked so eloquently about. Mm-hmm. But I think these 2 countries will be great places for me to sort of dive in and experience a little bit more of Latin America.
I love this. Now, what is the contingency of Paraguay joining the list?
It really just depends on how much stuff I find I want to do in Argentina, if I'm going to have the time to pop over and spend a few days in Paraguay. Argentina is like definitely super tourist friendly. In Paraguay, it's probably less so. I'm finding some things I definitely want to do, but I'm just trying to figure out, trying to make all the timing work.
And I don't know much about Paraguay. What is it that compels you to add that to the list?
Well, I'm sort of a completist. When I'm looking at the map and I'm thinking like, well, Brazil, that's a big trip. So that's out.
Oh, yeah.
Peru, that's a big trip. So that's out. What can I do in this sort of time where I can hit 2 countries that are relatively close to each other, easy to get to? There's a ton of flights between Argentina and Paraguay. And I just think it would be sort of an easy thing to tackle in one fell swoop. The thing you really enjoy about Europe that unfortunately, you don't really have in South Central America are the trains. So like when you're planning a European trip, you're looking at a map and you're like, well, I can train here. You don't really have that when you're going south. So it's really a matter of like trying to figure out what flights make sense, what dates make sense. I want to make sure I have enough time. I don't want to show up in a city and not actually have enough time to experience it. So,
and then the reverse is also true, where if I recall correctly, when you went to Colombia, you felt like you had a little too much time in certain places.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, Medellin, I spent more days there than was required. But, I got to drink a lot of coffee, so I'm not really complaining.
Well, I'm sure your Spanish language skills will serve you well. I like this resolution. This is a big resolution. I mean, you're putting a lot on the table, a lot of chips on the table, coming out strong. and banking on the fact that you will be able to travel in the pandemic.
I know. I am very much hoping that I can make this happen, because it's been too long since I've had like a real trip where I'm unplugged and out in the world. So fingers crossed that I'll be able to do that in April in celebration of my 30th, I think. 20th?
Oh, I thought you were old looking 28.
40th birthday. My
40th birthday. And by the way, I am sorry that I can't join. It must be a shock to the listeners here. But we haven't shared for 9 months. We haven't shared the fact that by the time this episode comes out, I'm going to have a second child.
A second child.
That's not my resolution, by the way, that I'm sharing. That's just a thing that's happening.
Yeah. That's past resolution at this point.
Right. No, it's almost fully to fruition.
Yeah.
And my son, Charlie, is unvaccinated, and then we'll have an infant. And unfortunately, that's just going to lock me down, at least in the time period that you're looking at for that trip.
And if it's a boy, I want you to consider Rick Steves Schmidt.
Ooh. I have to say that was not on the radar, but I like it.
What better way to get Rick Steves to pay attention than,
How about Rick Steves Europe Schmidt? That's good.
I like that.
Well, Ryan, you went big. You chose a big swing. You're going to plan a couple of big trips to Central and South America. I'm going small. Because I know I'm going to have my parental leave in the near future. And one thing that I did when Charlie was an infant was I knew I was going to have a lot of time with him bundled up. I'd be in the rocking chair, rocking him, trying to get him to sleep. And I was trying to make the best use of that time. And one thing that I had always wanted to do was if I had really sat down and tried, I could probably have listed out most of the U.S. presidents in order. But I wanted to just fully commit to long-term memory, to be totally automatic on the list of presidents of the United States. And so I had a little note card. It was posted right next to the rocking chair. It's still up there in the nursery. And I successfully memorized all the presidents of the United States. Are you interested in hearing it?
Does it start with Washington?
Of course, yeah. I don't do it backwards. I don't do it backwards yet. I learned them in groups of 3, so you might hear that cadence. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Adams, Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, Johnson, Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, McKinley, Roosevelt, Taft, Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. Not bad, right?
Yeah, and that Biden's TBD. A lot of folks aren't sure about that one.
Well, he's at least living in the White House.
That's true.
So I've been thinking to myself, what am I going to learn now that number 2's here? And I'm going to be rocking there. I have the president's note card, but obviously I've already got that down. What's next?
Spanish.
So my resolution, I already have fairly decent vocabulary in Spanish. My verb tense is not so great, but
I think by teaching me, you've taught yourself. That's sort of why I'm so bad at Spanish.
Listen, I do not want to be given credit for teaching you. Okay.
People say, "How is your Spanish so good?" I'm like, Kiernan Schmidt.
If there's a name that sounds like somebody who really knows Spanish, it's Kiernan Schmidt. No, it's got to be something contained and something that you can do while you're half asleep, because infants tend to keep you up late at night and early in the morning.
This sounds exhausting.
And so it needs to be a contained piece of knowledge, and it's great for something that you want to commit to your long-term memory. So my first resolution is I want to learn all the countries and capitals in the world. That's my contained list, all the countries and their capitals, and I want to just have them at my fingertips. Somebody says Slovenia, I say Ljubljana. I want it that fast. Every country in the world. It's ambitious. It's more ambitious than the president's.
I mean, this is going to be really good when you finally get that Jeopardy audition.
Absolutely. Now, Ryan, moving on to
when I saw this resolution on the list, I assumed you were trying to visit a bunch of capitals.
No, listen, I don't want to bank on the fact that these travel restrictions are going to be raised. I want something that I can definitely achieve. I take that approach to the resolutions. And so for this number one, this is my least ambitious one.
I don't think I've ever had a resolution that was achievable. It's always like, I'm going to get a 6-pack, something like that. And I end up going down to the deli.
Down and buy a 6-pack.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
All right, Ryan. Well, what is your second resolution?
So my second resolution...
Travel resolution. I don't want to hear about all your other ones.
No. My second travel resolution is to visit a national park that I haven't been to this summer. And right now, the top two contenders are the new national park in West Virginia, which it looks really awesome and, has is drivable, which is a big plus.
And this is the new River Gorge.
Exactly, the new River Gorge. So that's a brand new park, brand spanking new. That would be really fun. But you've really sold me on the beauty of Maine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is also on the list. So it really just depends sort of what area has the best cycling. So my boyfriend will be the most happy while we're there. But I think both would probably be pretty good cycling spots.
One consideration that you might want to have if you're going to New River Gorge National Park, you can be in Shenandoah in under 3 hours, and you could hit 2 national parks.
Oh, Shenandoah is supposed to be amazing.
Yeah, Shenandoah is great. Very beautiful.
Well, maybe that's the ticket. But what I'm committing to is visiting a national park that I haven't been to yet, and preferably one we haven't covered on the show, because that would give us, material.
Well, there's definitely more in Acadia to talk about than what I have covered on the show. We have talked extensively about Maine. And if you recall, my primary experience of Acadia was that it was overrun with people. So if you do indeed choose Acadia, I would recommend that you not do it during the summer.
Then maybe West Virginia is where it's at. It's still a new park. It hasn't hit peak yet. And it would have that new park smell,
And Ryan, if you're down there, you know where you got to stop. Our repeat guest and CBS Sunday Morning contributor, Connor Knighton, grew up right there.
I would love to have Connor take me to a national park. He wouldn't even have to look at any of the maps. He would just be like, "Oh, here's where we're going. Here's what we're going to see." That would be exciting.
You've always told me how charmed you are by Connor.
I am very charmed.
Well, this one's you are sort of doing resolutions in reverse ambition, and I'm going in forward ambition. So you went from Central and South America, very ambitious, to a national park visit, which I really like. And now I went from memorizing countries and capital. Now this one, Ryan, this is a big one, okay? And this is a bit of an announcement too, but the details are still being figured out, but I am going to talk about it, okay? So you may remember maybe 2 years ago, we had on a guest. His name was Thomas Jonglez, and he owns Jonglez Publishing, which is one of my absolute favorite travel book imprints. And they do the secret guides, the Secret New York, Secret New Orleans, Secret DC. They have Secret Brussels, Secret Rome. I mean, these books are all around the world. And I have found them to be some of the most unexpected and exciting and informative trips into history and art and culture. Just totally, to say off the beaten track, understates how amazing these books are at going to places you don't expect. And after I talked to Thomas, I was so inspired. I said to him, Thomas, you really should consider a secret Boston. And as it happens, I live in Boston, great historic city full of these secret treasures.
Right. And it's like you have 17 episodes on Boston already. So
exactly. So I've done basically half the book. And he said to me, why don't you write up a proposal? Give me a list of the sorts of places that you might include. And so I did that. And then the COVID has definitely, sadly, a couple of the places are closed until COVID passes completely. But we've been going back and forth on the contract, and it's looking good that Secret Boston is going to be written this year. So my resolution 2, all going well, fingers crossed, is that I'm going to write the book Secret Boston. And Ryan, this is the first time we can say that Out of Office has actually made us a tiny bit of scratch.
Yeah, this is now the out of office media empire, not just the podcast.
It grows. It grows and it grows.
This is like Succession, folks. Like,
maybe I'll need to show you the contract. It's not quite at Succession levels quite yet.
Yeah,
but you got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Well, that's very exciting. I am thrilled to leaf through it and read chunks of it.
You're just going to leaf through it. You're not going to commit to reading the whole thing.
I will read a lot of it. I mean, I'll have to go to Boston.
At least carry it around.
I will at least purchase it full price.
Okay, that's great.
And not from Amazon. So,
and I will sign it to you.
Thank you.
All right, Ryan. Now, final travel resolution for 2022.
Well, anyone who's listened to the pod knows that I am obsessed with touring old Gilded Age mansions. There are quite a few in upstate New York that I haven't had a chance yet to tour.
Mm-hmm.
Many have been closed during the pandemic, and they're kind of slowly reopening. So I really want to check a few more of those boxes off my list.
I love that. Now, how do you find all of these? Because I have to say, you're always coming up with really cool places that I'm not familiar with. I'm just wondering, where do you find them all?
Well, I mean, almost every little town upstate has some kind of random house that's been preserved by one of the local historical societies. And when you kind of Google around, you get all these lists of, the top 10 houses to tour in the Hudson Valley and the top houses to see in upstate New York. And, there are so many options. In fact, if you even go more north, there are places like Bolt Castle, which is this old castle built in the 1800s, built in 1900. That's available for tours, and it looks sort of like a Tudor castle. It's very interesting. So, and that's on an island. So there are just so many different kind of, there was a lot of money in New York. There still is. I've never seen any of it, but I've heard tell. And folks just built these gorgeous houses, and a lot of them were torn down, but quite a few remain to tour. And we talked about a couple in the Christmas episode. So I'd like to do, I'd say, 3 more houses this year that I haven't been to, and kind of put together, something near the end of the year, like the historic houses of the Hudson Valley.
I love it. It's a part of your pandemic experience that I have found very fascinating, and you've been really surprising me with the places you're digging up. And
I've got a car now.
Do you?
I do. My mom gave me her old 2001 Jag.
Oh my God! Where are you parking it?
Every day I have to wake up at 7:30 and move it. So,
my God!
Yeah, I could see it outside my window yesterday, but today it's a street over. So I'm hoping it's still there.
Do you have to have a parking permit?
No, you can. It's Brooklyn. You can park on the sidewalk or whatever. People don't care.
Wow, that's amazing. Ryan Davis has a car. My God.
Yeah, it's frightening. But,
oh my God! Should I start looking for real estate for you up in Boston?
No. Upstate,
you should come up to Boston though. Maybe we could do a mansion or house tour up here together. That'd be fun.
I would love that.
We go to the Kennedy Presidential Library.
Oh, I've never been, which is so crazy.
You need a car to get there. Hard to get to.
I got
transport. One. All right, Ryan. Well, my third resolution I consider the most ambitious, and it's even bigger than writing a book, which, by the way, is a pretty damn big resolution, especially when you're having an infant. And I fear that in a year I'm going to look back and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I announced that I was going to write that book." We're going to have to hold this.
The book will become like a baby book. Just
that'd be, as long as it pays.
Goo goo gaga.
As long as I get that $1,000 that's promised to me. No, this one is it is aspirational, and it's because I have to admit, pandemics got me down right now. Omicron, a second Christmas affected by it. Do you know this pandemic struck right at the first half of my first parental leave 2 years ago, and now it's still going on. I'm going out on parental leave again, and it's still alive, and so it really has been getting me down. So what I am resolving is to keep planning trips and to keep hoping that these strictures are going to lift and that we'll actually be able to get out there and explore the world. The idea that I haven't been on a plane in years is very disheartening to me. But I still do believe with the vaccinations and the boosters and having what I hope is a more capable government, that we will actually move past this and we can still keep the spirit of travel alive.
Amen. No, I think that is, and especially hard for folks who have young kids who aren't even able to be vaccinated yet.
Yes,
so,
yes, and that's why I need to stand up and say it, Ryan. It's our responsibility to keep our listeners dreaming of where they can go once this is all over, and that's what I love. You are inspiring me by talking about all the places you're hoping to go. You're very specific, and I could see you have a 2022 map that feels achievable but ambitious.
Yeah. And in any other year, it would not be that ambitious.
No,
but in the year of the pandemic, yeah,
sure.
it is. Yeah. I mean, I'm just hoping Mexico City doesn't close down and take my birthday deposit with it.
They're going to have to put so many more chemical floor mats down.
I'm going to make sure everybody who comes to the party gets sprayed with one of those sprayers.
And for anybody who doesn't get that joke, you got to go back to a couple episodes ago where we did an update on 2021 Mexico City, where Ryan visited. Ryan, do you have a trip back planned soon?
I'm thinking I'm going to go back just briefly to finalize some party details in like February. And maybe I'll use that time to do a little day trip. There's some cities outside of Mexico City that I've always heard about, and I've never made the time to do it. But I think it would be interesting. So I'm not committing, but I am strongly suggesting that I might do some interesting travel that we can talk about.
We got a soft resolution 4 here. I like it. It's a good place to wrap. And Ryan, maybe you could drive your new car down there. It'd be easier to go to those day trips.
I'm gonna stick with flying.
Fair enough. All right,
I don't think that car will get that far.
Well, that wraps up our resolutions, our travel resolutions for 2022. Surely we're going to have to do a follow-up episode where we listen back and embarrass ourselves at the fact that we haven't achieved anything.
I hope not. I'm looking forward to the book.
With that, Ryan, it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right. Well, we're here in the last stop of the show. This is the final segment of the show, and it's where it's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment, and it's where you and I each share one thing that whoa, did you just beep your car outside? Just making sure it's safe. I can hear it there. It's where we each share. Really anything could qualify. It could be a TV show. It could be a movie. It could be a trip that we actually took. It could be a plane ticket that fell out of a book as you were leafing through it. Anything that inspired the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I have to ask you, as I ask you every episode, have you brought a last stop this week?
I have. It's a little bit dark. But it's really interesting. So, folks might remember a few episodes back, we did a 100 years of the Appalachian Trail. Remember that, Kiernan?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And we talked about the folks who complete the trail, who go from one end to the other. And, it's a small group of people who do it every year, but it's obviously a tremendous accomplishment. So back in 2018, in the summer of 2018, there was a tent that was found in Florida with the body of a man who had passed away. A young guy, in his 30s. I still consider that young.
Sure.
Young guy in his 30s, and nobody knew who this guy was. He didn't have any identification on him. Nobody knew his name. So the internet did its thing and started to build sort of the narrative of who this guy was. And did you know there was this thing called trail names?
Trail names.
Yeah. No. So if you're like a serious hiker who does really long hikes on the Appalachian Trail, folks don't use their real name. They make up sort of nicknames to use on the trail and sort of known by that. And this guy's name was mostly Harmless. And, nobody could figure out who he was for several years, essentially. They tried to figure out, they figured out his path. He had been on the trail for 15 months. He was a New Yorker. We found out he lived in Brooklyn. He took the train upstate, just a couple stops, got off at near Harrison State Park, which we've talked about on the pod before. I've gone hiking there, and hiked from Harrison State Park all the way down to Florida over the course of 15 months. Isn't that an extraordinary walk?
Crazy, yeah.
Yeah. And he was just sort of trying to escape his life. It ended up who he wasn't that interesting. He had some tragedy in his life. He was just trying to escape and sort of become a different person. And to this day, nobody knows sort of why he died. There's no evidence. I mean, there's no foul play or anything, but he, it was this fascinating mystery. And I've linked the Wired story, which I think is a really good telling of it, about both who he was, the travels that he got up to in that 15 months and the folks who tried to figure out and identify him so they could get, word back to his family that he had passed away. But a really interesting kind of look into the culture of folks who basically like live on the Appalachian Trail and walk it all the time and know it really well and have friends who walk it. There are people who go out and leave, one of the sites, one of the people who had seen him days before he died was a woman who goes to the Florida Trail and leaves bottles of water around for people to get because you're pretty far away from the road there. And so there, I didn't know about this whole sort of community of people around the trail, in the trail, who really kind of support each other, know each other. And when this guy went missing, they were determined to figure out who he was. So a really interesting story, a sad story, but ultimately, I think interesting story about a community that, if I ever get the balls to hike more than 8 hours, maybe I'll get to experience. But great, wow. Really interesting, mostly harmless. Link to the Wired piece, and if you get more curious, there are several podcasts about him too.
Yeah, wow, that's a great one.
Do you have hopefully a less depressing last stop this week, Kiernan? I
do indeed. This one is great and uplifting, but it's also an article we'll link to, and that's The New Yorker had their travel issue, which is one of my favorite issues of the year, and there was an awesome article by Rebecca Mead, one of the regulars there. And it's called Pompeii Still Has Buried Secrets. And for anyone that's interested in archaeology and in Italy, and especially about Roman history, excellent article bringing to light lots of new things that I didn't know about Pompeii. And it turns out, Ryan, it's full of facts that maybe you haven't heard of. But of course, Pompeii is adjacent to Mount Vesuvius, which had a massive explosion, and it buried and perfectly preserved this city. And it is still in the process of being excavated. And what I found so interesting, I had no idea that generations of archaeologists have continued to leave untouched parts of the Pompeii site so that future archaeologists who have more advanced technologies will have access to them and be able to excavate them in a way that might be safer, that may be better preserve the art and the culture that's laid underneath. So there are these buried pieces of ground that everybody knows is filled with further history and treasures that are purposely being preserved and going untouched.
That's incredible. I was obsessed with Pompeii as like a pre-teenager. When you learn about it, and you see the images of the people basically frozen in time. It is a really sort of remarkable thing to learn about as a kid, because it's kind of the first time you learn about like the destructive power of nature.
Yes, and what's going to wow you is that there's still a third of the city that isn't excavated for this for being held to be excavated by future archaeologists. Though you do kind of wonder, like, at what point does the technology get good enough that you go, all right, let's do the last third. And so Rebecca Mead walks and explores some of the newly excavated areas, and she goes into snack bars and she sees these paintings that have been revealed and are being wonderfully preserved and unveiled and discovered every day. She interviews archaeologists who are talking about how, so for example, there's Roman law books that say these snack bars, these restaurants that they had on the streets, because famously most Roman homes did not have any sort of kitchen or food preparation area, that it was very common in Roman cities to go out and just eat out. And there's a law that they have from Roman literature, that they have from Roman law books that says that these restaurants were not allowed to serve hot food. And they've just excavated one where they have absolutely confirmed there are pots of soup there. And so they're saying, what we're bringing to life is, this is how working people lived and functioned in Pompeii. And so you can kind of dream up these scenarios where, maybe in Rome, they're putting out these laws that all over the empire, these snack bars can't serve soup. But in day-to-day living, there was soup here. And then we can even tell you what was in the soup based on these excavations. And so all sorts of little bits of trivia and interesting history just coming to light. And there's still a third of a city to dig up and explore.
That's really amazing. I always just assumed that it was done.
No, not at all. Not at all. Still very much an active site. And they talk about, too, the environmental pressures that, how do you protect this ground that has ruins underneath it so that it doesn't erode, so that those future archaeologists can, in fact, have safe access to it. So great read.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Do tourists visit like that area of Pompeii?
They can, yes, you can walk what is excavated, and then you can see the areas that have been untouched. And one of the markers is that they are shored up so that the land stays in place.
Well, I am glad that there's going to be more content for an Indiana Jones reboot in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. As long as the aliens are featured in it.
Oh, they're aliens and
oh, you didn't see the last the crystal skull. Oh,
no.
That's brutally bad. Yeah, there's aliens, baby.
We just rewatched the first one over Christmas with a bunch of cousins, and there's some stuff in there that doesn't age well.
No, and there's a lot in there that doesn't age well. And speaking of, but who does age well is Harrison Ford, and they've got a new Indiana Jones
like
getting
a fine
worked on
wine
right now.
Yeah, that guy's amazing.
Well, Ryan, next time we are going to talk about traveling to see wildlife. This is a topic, Ryan, you're not going to believe this. This was actually on our list of topics we wanted to talk about when we came up with the idea of Out of Office, a travel podcast 3 years ago. I revisited that list. And the idea is when you structure a trip where seeing wildlife, maybe you're going to see a bear, maybe you want to see a moose, maybe you want to see a jaguar, maybe you want to see a lion. This puts a lot of stress and pressure on the trip because, animals are unpredictable. They're wild things. That's why they're called that. They're wild. So I'm going to present a couple tips from my own travels about precautions you should take and ways that you can increase the likelihood that you will get to see those dream animals. And
have a good interaction. Or no interaction, which is
exactly. No interaction is good interaction. And that, that's how I feel about us.
Well, I look forward to that, Kiernan. Keep your head out of the bear.
No, I'd say the same to you. You're out in Bushwick, so there's a lot more of them walking around.
Well, until then, Kiernan, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken. Do you do any good wildlife calls, Ryan?
Oh, God, no. I was going to try to make a noise, but I don't know what it would have sounded like.
All right, well, I'd prefer you make no noise then.
Yeah, the police would show up.